Good afternoon. I'm Rabbi Eddie Sukal from the Shul. We gather to pay tribute today to Belle, London. May her memory forever be a blessing. Shiviti Adonai l'negdi tamid ki mini balemot. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, O God, nor will you let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. It is a curiosity that tradition has us begin a funeral or memorial service with words from a psalm that speak of exaltation of the heart and enduring happiness, when in fact the mood is exactly the opposite today. Today is a day of grief and sadness. It is a day of mourning and weeping and tears. But we begin with this psalm to help ourselves understand that even in our grief, we acknowledge that life is a gift, and that Belle's life was a gift to her and to all of you. And so we do grieve, and we grieve deeply, and we grieve fully, but we do so with an understanding, both in our head and in our heart, that there is much to be grateful for. There is so much in Belle's life for which we are thankful. Not merely the length of years granted to her, though they were many, but also the quality of her life and the way she spent the years granted to her. In the way that she shared herself with all of you, her family, and with her friends. In the love that she gave and the love that she received. In the relationships that she created and maintained. All of this is part of the gift of her life, and it remains with all of you in your hearts. Elsewhere in Psalms we read that the days of our years are 70, or perhaps by reason of strength 80 years. And yet 1,000 years in God's sight are but as a yesterday when it is past. Here's the essential message of the psalm as it continues. Teach us therefore to number our days, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. May your favor, O God, be upon us. Establish the work of our hands, that it may long endure. Teach us to number our days, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. That's the way Belle lived. In good times, in times of celebration and simcha, and in difficult times, times of challenge and sadness. She lived in a way that enabled her heart to attain wisdom. To you, her children, Debbie and Ann and Alan, and of course to the grandchildren, and to the family members that have been brought into the family through love and marriage, and certainly, of course, to Belle's great-granddaughter, to India. To all of you, we gather with you as your friends to be with you in this sad time. We gather with you so that we might embrace you and comfort you, and we hope that you'll feel the presence of loving friends, and that this will be comforting for you. And we join with you today, not only that we might comfort you, but to call upon God on your behalf. And we hope and we pray that you will also feel God's loving embrace, and that this too will be comforting. We who have mourned understand that in your grief there is sadness, in your silence, loneliness. These are days of sorrow. As you grieve, may you be able to remember that your mother and grandmother's love, that Belle's love united all of you in life. And hers was and is a love that death does not and cannot sever. It stays with you in your hearts. We understand that in light as in darkness, God is with us and at our side. We pray for comfort for all those who grieve. Adonai ro'i lo echsar binot desha yarbitseni al mei menuchot yenahaleni nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'ma'agalei tzedek lema'an shemo gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shiftecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neget sorerai dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shafti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. The words of the 23rd Psalm. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. To share words of remembrance and words of tribute, I'd like to call upon Alan and Debbie to come forward.
My mom, Belle. Just her name says it all. She was always the belle of the ball. Our mom was an extraordinary woman. All through her life, she was admired for her kindness, warmth, and loving heart. Her incredible beauty, inside and out, was clearly obvious to everyone that knew her. As a young girl, my most memorable memory that has stayed with me all through my life was her compassion and courage. One event in particular. It was in the early 60s. Mom had taken us for a day of fun to the Washington Zoo. We had a babysitter, Nanny, that came with us. Her name was Janie. She adored us kids, and we loved her very much. She was a part of our family. She actually smelled like Ben Gay all the time. Remember that? I remember arriving at the zoo gates and someone stopping my mom and telling her that we could all go in except Janie. A sign said, "No black people in." I can still see my mom screaming, fighting for a civil rights issue that was clearly unimaginable. She said, "If she's not going in, neither are we," and we left. Not mad or disappointed, just sad for what we had witnessed. That moment, at that young age, my mother became my hero. Her love for music, people, and most of all, her family made her the one-of-a-kind person that she was. I will love and miss you every day of my life, Mom. Rest in peace.
So it was 21 years ago that I last stood up here at the funeral home and gave a speech about Michael, and many of you were here, and that was very hard. And this is a different kind of feeling, a much older person and a fuller life, but nevertheless, it's difficult. I wanted to just talk for a couple minutes about my mom's life that most of you don't know much about. We see our parents at the end of their lives in nursing homes and with dementia, and you tend to forget they had whole lives before then. And so just a little bit. She grew up in Brighton Beach. Everything you've heard about Brighton Beach. Those were the greatest days of her life. As kids, we don't let our kids in our front yards anymore. They would sleep on the beach all night long. Their parents wouldn't even know where they were. But she always had great memories of New York. Her parents were Russian immigrants. She adored her father, very close to him. And as she grew up, she dropped out of high school and became a model. If you come to the Shiva, you'll see we have some pictures of her. She was a stunning blonde model. And she was fixed up with my father on a blind date. He was from Cleveland. He flew to New York and was told to look for a blonde in Grand Central Station. And there she was, and he flipped over and was ready to get married that day. They got married about 6 months later, and she moved to Cleveland, where really her whole life was in South Euclid, me, Ann, and Debbie. It really was her whole life. We lived on Eastway, moved to Stonehaven. Life was good. Ann told this story about Janie. I have another story very vivid that tells you about my mother. I was about 9 years old. We had a terrible snowstorm, like 1.5 feet of snow. Everybody was snowed in, and it was a beautiful white night. And she said, she didn't ask my dad, she asked me, how about let's get our clothes on and go looking for people stranded in their cars. And so we walked around South Euclid, walked around our neighborhood, and found several people stuck and helped them out, helped them home. And we always used to talk about that. My mom moved to California after I went out there for residency and loved the life out there. Ann moved out, and I got married, and Patty became like a true daughter to my mom and to my dad. Patty and I had Stephen, Michael, and Eliana, and about the same time, Debbie and Kenny were having Allie and Carly and Harris in Washington, and they were very, very proud of their grandchildren. My dad died fairly young in '93, so my mother's really been alone for 25 years. Rabbi asked us, did she ever date or get close to getting remarried? Never even thought about it. And then Patty and I and the kids moved back to Cleveland. I started working at the clinic. My mom stayed out in Palm Springs, and she went to Israel with us. Pam was there, that Pam Painter. And Michael died there, and that was devastating. I don't think my mother really ever was the same after Michael died. They say that the grandparents get forgotten and all of that, and I think she did somewhat. But following that, she and Ann moved back to Cleveland, and after a few years, life moved on, and she went from a series of places, and the thing about her is she never really complained. She went from Sherry Park to the Wiles to Myers to Menorah, never really complained. She had a great sense of humor. Debbie mentioned it. I'm sure Stephen and Eliana will mention it. I could make her laugh about almost anything. But one incident in particular, I want you to picture this on her, I think it was her 90th birthday, but it was about 3-4 years ago. I decided, not a good decision, to take my mom for a 3-day weekend to New Orleans, just my mom and me. And she could walk maybe 10, 20 steps without having to stop. And I just didn't think about it. She loved jazz, loved New Orleans. It was 95 degrees, very hot. Everything was a hassle. I wasn't enjoying myself, but she was. And we got back to the hotel one day, and I said, Mom, you probably should take a shower, and I know we don't have the shower seat and all. And I wasn't thinking. She said, well, I'll take a bath. So probably 150, 160 pounds, barely could walk. And so I somehow got her, I filled up the bathtub, got her in the bathtub. The whole time she kept saying, "Don't look at me, now don't look at me." So I was like a towel and not looking and trying not to drop her. And then she gets in and I go watch TV, kind of relax, and about 15 minutes, "Okay, I'm ready to come out." And she was sitting with her legs straight out in a bathtub, no water now. Did you ever try to lift somebody out of a bathtub by yourself? So I couldn't lift her. I kept looking, and I shouldn't have been looking. And she said, "Why don't you call the firemen? It'll be a good story. They'll come. They're good looking. They're big, strong guys, and I'm not calling the firemen to help get you out of." So I struggled and got her out, told her the whole time I never saw a thing. 10 years ago, I married Pam, and my mom adopted her, very open mind about marriage and family, and she adopted her like a daughter, and Sam, Solomon, Olivia, and Tova like grandchildren of her own. Stephen married Michelle, and my mom really adored Michelle for Stephen. She just couldn't get over how much they loved each other, and she was very happy with her. And I still think till the day she died, even though she saw Indy several times, she couldn't believe Stephen was a father, couldn't believe it was actually his baby. With Eliana, her passion was playing Scrabble. Eliana's going to inherit my mom's Scrabble set. And she always said to me after I said, "You visited with Eliana? I heard you were with Eliana today. How was it?" And she said, "You know, Alan, she's so smart." And as if that was a big surprise, but somehow in Scrabble, she realized how smart her granddaughter was. She recently met Allie's husband, Dave, and Carly's boyfriend, Tyler, and was very happy with both of them. And only wish she would have been able to see Allie's baby, who's 2 months away from being born. She would have been so happy to see Allie as a mom. Harris, her one word for her was, "He's so handsome. He's so handsome." That's what she always said about you. Anyway, I want to give special thanks to my sister Anne, who was her caretaker and best friend for the last 10 years. And for that, Debbie and I are always eternally grateful. My mom brought happiness and joy to everyone around her. She'll be greatly missed. And I'm going to get her on one last thing. I love you more than you love me.
Oh,
I got it in.
that's great, Alan.
Debbie and Alan, thank you. And I'd like to call 2 of Belle's grandchildren, Stephen and Eliana, to come forward.
Hi. I am going to share a few memories of Nana. So Nana taught me how to play cards when I was little with her siblings, her brothers. They would sit me down at the table, and they started with Go Fish, and it didn't take very long until they were teaching me how to bet in gin rummy. And I was about 5 or 6 when I started doing this. So I'd like to think that she's at a card table right now with Dodie, Mendy, and a glass of Merlot. She always had a very great sense of humor. She was sarcastic, a little bit crass, and ahead of her time. As my dad mentioned, most of you may know I used to spend every Saturday playing Scrabble with her. It has held a very special place in my heart for a long time. Sorry. So we used to spend the afternoons joking, laughing a lot, eating Dave subs. And for a long time I was losing. I still have a picture of the first time I ever won. And as the years went on, we actually learned to cheat together. So Anne, I'm very sorry, but that's actually why you kept losing. Whenever, as I got older, she would ask about men in my life. She would say, "Do you have any gentlemen callers?" That was her word. So I would start calling her after dates and tell her about them. And her first and most important question was, "Is he nice to you?" And she said, "Does he treat you right?" After that, nothing else matters. I was always very proud of Nana and everything she stood for in her life. She even voted this year. I was there that day. But I will leave you guys with what will now be my favorite story of Nana. So my whole life, she said to me, "Be good." And I always thought that it was similar to our Uncle Duddy, who would say, "Do good work." When I was a teenager, she started to say, "Be good. And if you can't be good, be careful." And I thought that was very cute. And I bought pillows, trinkets that had the saying. I thought it was adorable that she would say it. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, I was saying goodbye one time, and she finally finished her saying. She said to me, "Be good. And if you can't be good, be careful. And if you can't be careful, name it after me." So that was the Nana that I knew, loved, and will miss. Thank you.
Nana used to tell a story. It wasn't particularly funny or interesting, but I always thought it perfectly encapsulated her. She was a young girl, maybe 10 or so, living in that small bungalow in Brooklyn with 5 siblings and immigrant parents. And they didn't have any money, and things were pretty bleak in America at that time. And her father, Sam, had lent the neighbor a few dollars. He was this small hunchback man. And one night he came back over to the house to repay the debt. And Nana and her cousin Huddy were, she described it, in the basement, and they were in the kitchen. And the hunchback man kind of shuffled in and pulled out a few coins, and he said, "Sam, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I'm a little short." And Nana said she just lost it. Her and her cousin started laughing, and as she told the story, she'd laugh, and it was contagious, and you'd start laughing, and as soon as you both reached the peak of your laughter, she would stop laughing and stop herself and make a sad face and say, "Oh, don't laugh, don't laugh. I feel so bad for that man. He had nothing. We let him keep the money. He was poor." And I think that was her. It was compassion and generosity and humor, and she laughed her way through life, not in a mean way, but in a beautiful way that made a sad world a little happier. She was born into the Great Depression, the fourth of 6 children. They had nothing, rented out their basement, the 1-bedroom home to kind of pay the bills. And father was an inventor, a brilliant but kind of struggling electrician. Her mom was an Eastern European woman, tough and stubborn, and through it all, she had a idyllic childhood. I mean, my dad described it story after story, causing mischief with their brothers, or laughing on the subway, or playing games into kind of the night. And that's just how she was, singing and laughing her way through life. It was always happy stories, and never any sad times. She loved her kids more than anything. Alan, her eldest, was more than a son to her in a lot of ways. He was a beacon of hope, I think. She once told me that the day he graduated from medical school was the proudest day of her life. Something kind of a culmination, I guess, of a lot of generations of hardship and stuff. And I don't think anybody could say anything more than, you're the best possible version of a daughter there is. You were truly her best friend, and I don't think she would have been happy for the last 20 years without you, so thank you. She always said how lucky she was to have you, and don't tell Ann, but I don't know why she does so much for me. And Debbie, the baby of the family, Belle, I think in a lot of ways she recognized herself in you. Charismatic, funny, talented, generous, down to the bone. She loved you so much because I think she was you. And she loved her family, and her family loved her, and what else can you ask for in life? My dad asked me today to talk about my relationship with Donna, how she was as a grandmother. And, I thought about it and sat down, and I think in a lot of ways she was more of a friend than a grandmother to me. I mean, she was a typical Jewish grandma. She wrote me letters and nagged me about getting married and having kids. But when we talked, somehow that never really lasted that long. It was just kind of two old souls just telling stories and jokes and laughing together. I remember this one story when we went to Israel. There was an older woman on the trip, and at the end of most nights they had us singing group songs, and this one woman would sing in this opera-style voice, just so louder than everybody else, like, ah! And every time she did that, Nana would poke me and whisper to me, "Who the hell does this woman think she is?" And she would start imitating her. She would wink at me and start singing louder than her. And we would just both hysterically laugh. Everybody would look at us, and we'd probably have to leave the room. I think most of the time it felt like we were just in the back of the class making fun of a substitute teacher together. She grew up with nothing. Her brother died very young. She had cancer twice. She battled mental health issues. She lost her husband. She lost a grandchild. She lost all her siblings. And through it all, I think she lived an extraordinarily happy life. One last thing I remember a few weeks ago, we were at the nursing home, and this is one of the last things I ever heard her say. She had both eyes closed and she could barely speak, and I was with Anne, and we were sitting at the table and trying to get her to eat. And Anne kept saying, "You have to eat, Belle. Come on, eat, eat." She barely just opened her eyes just a little bit with kind of all her strength, and she looked at Anne half conscious and said, "What are you, my mom? Stop telling me what to do." And then she started laughing. Ha! And I think that's the takeaway for all of us, that life isn't as serious as we think. Every minor detail isn't a fatal flaw, and life is what it is, so we might as well have fun with it. We might as well find the humor in it all. So the next time something bad happens, just everybody think of Nana and try to laugh it off. And as she always said, this too shall pass. So I love you, Nana.
Liana and Stephen, thank you. Tradition teaches that words that come from the heart enter directly into the heart, and your wonderful memories certainly have entered all of our hearts. Suffice to say, no one would ever have described Belle as a wallflower or shrinking violet. She was anything but. She could be outspoken in many ways, and as has already been highlighted, particularly when it came to finding humor in things. And she wasn't afraid to make a joke or to poke fun. She didn't do it with a meanness. Really, it was mostly out of a wonderful ability to see what was funny in all situations, even if they weren't intrinsically funny, even in sadness. To find the humor, to find the one thing that would tickle your funny bone. And she loved to laugh. And she was good at making herself laugh and at making others laugh. She also, as all of you have noted, had a tremendous warmth about her. And she was genuinely loving and caring and concerned about others. And I suspect that no doubt that came from being one of 6 children. As Stephen noted, the 4th of 6. Growing up in a tiny little place in Brighton Beach, either Alan or one of your sisters mentioned, all 6 children, all the siblings lived together in one bedroom. Exactly how that worked remains a bit of a mystery to all of us, especially those of us that dwell in suburban homes where everybody has their own room, etc. And life wasn't always easy for Belle. She suffered and struggled through her share of hardship. Widowed young, and certainly, of course, the death of her grandson. Life wasn't always easy, but it never embittered her. It didn't sour her. She kept a wonderful, positive attitude. That's just who she was temperamentally. It was somehow in her DNA to be positive, to stay positive, whatever happened. And to lead all of you, in some ways as a matriarch, to lead all of you in that positive attitude. She moved into Meyer's apartment a couple of years ago, and from there, about a half a year ago, to Monroe Park. And as wonderful as it is to have apartments like Meyer's and to have places like Monroe Park, it's not where anybody really wants to move into. But Belle did, and she made the most of it. And she shared her soul with the staff that was there in the way she could. And one of them was to teach them old-time songs. There was music playing as we all came in today. She loved jazz, as somebody mentioned, and so she taught them the old-time songs. But she shared more than just songs. She shared who she was and what her spirit was like and what she was all about as an individual. And so it's not surprising that the nursing staff and the other staff at Myers and Monroe, they all loved her and they fawned over her. They thanked you for allowing them to take care of her. That's unusual. Usually we thank the caregivers of our parents and grandparents, but they thanked you as Belle's family for the privilege of taking care of her. It's a remarkable tribute. It seems like a small thing, but it's no small thing at all. I didn't know Belle particularly well, though we met several times over the years. I'll share one story we talked about yesterday, and Alan asked me to share again today. And that was at Pam and Alan's wedding. I was standing under the chuppah with Pam and Alan. I was conducting the service. I was a few minutes into it. I know Connie and Neil remember this as well. And I guess I wasn't speaking just quite loudly or clearly enough, and Belle called out, "I can't hear, Rabbi, could you speak up?" And loud enough for pretty much everybody to hear. And I had my marching orders and tried to fall in line accordingly. It's a wonderful story because it, in so many ways, big and small, captures who Belle was. Judaism has very many strong teachings about when we die. And one of the things it teaches us is that in death, all people are equal. Whether we are rich or poor, whether we have amassed material goods or we lead a simple life, we're all equal in death. And we represent that in several of the traditions. One, of course, is we bury our dead with open hands rather than clenched fists, as a way to say you take nothing with you tangible from this world. No material goods accompany us after we die. And the rabbis taught that what survives us is not our material goods. We leave them all behind. Others may inherit this or that, but that's not the essence. That's just material goods. That's not the essence of who we were. What survives us is the way we were known in life. And the rabbis talk about a particular crown. We usually think of crowns as something that royalty possesses, but the rabbi said, no, this is a crown that's available to all of us. And it's the Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. And they describe it in the rabbinic literature that this crown of a good name, it's more precious than gold or silver, than emeralds or diamonds, and any precious gems. And the crown of a good name, and the way some people live, and in the way some people love, they acquire for themselves that Keter Shem Tov. That's what survives us after we're gone. And Belle earned for herself that Keter Shem Tov, that crown of her good name, many, many, many times over. And she bequeaths it to all of you, her family. And you will carry the crown of her good name into the future. With every hearty laugh that you laugh, with every good joke you tell, with every kind and caring and compassionate word or deed that you say or do for another person, you will wear the crown of her good name, and you will carry it into the future. In this way, you pay tribute to her life, and you honor her memory. For all of you, and for all who knew Belle, her memory will forever be a blessing. Zichrona livracha. And we will always be blessed for having known her and loved her. Amen. A translation of a poem by the great Hebrew poet Chaim Nachman Bialik. After my death mourn me thus. See, there was a person, and now she is no more. Before her time, her life was ended, and the song of her life was broken. Oh, she had one more melody, and now that melody is lost. The melody of Belle's life has come to a close. And though we shall not hear her voice anymore, or hear her sing her songs anymore, the melody of her soul stays with us and resonates deep within each of us. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember Belle. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. For as long as we live, she shall always be a part of us, and we shall always remember her. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmata Bella Miriam Shehalcha Le'olama Began Eden Tehei Menuchata Ana Bal Harachamim Hastirehu Beseter Kanafecha Le'olamim Vayitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'Shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Bella Miriam, for she has now entered eternity. O God of mercy, we pray, may Belle find refuge in your eternal presence, and may her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated. We will continue at Mayfield Cemetery for our interment service. Following burial, the family will observe Shiva at the Sherry Park Apartments. This is in the Sherry Park reception room. Shiva will be today through Thursday. Today certainly after services, and then tomorrow and Thursday, 1 to 4 p.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. For those who may wish to honor Belle's memory with a charitable contribution, the family suggests that you direct your generosity to the Michael David London Memorial Fund, care of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland, or if you wish, to the Menorah Park Foundation. Zecher Tzadeket Livracha, the memory of a good and a righteous woman, is forever a blessing to all who knew her and to all who loved her. Amen.